is our interpreter this evening, and he's going to help our Spanish-speaking families get into the interpretation services. Armando?
Muy buenas tardes, yo soy Armando Ramírez, soy el intérprete que va a estar con ustedes aquí esta noche. Para entrar a interpretación, por favor, oprima el botón que está abajo de la pantalla que tiene el globo. Una vez que haga clic allí, por favor, oprima el botón que dice Spanish, español. De esa manera los va a llevar al cuarto de interpretación. Muchas gracias. Thank you, Miss Sandy.
Thank you, Armando. So welcome to the San Mateo High School PTO General Meeting. Thank you everyone for coming. I'm really looking forward to hearing from our speakers tonight. But first, I have a couple of quick announcements. First, let's call the general meeting of the San Mateo High School PTO to order. It's February 23rd at 7:03 p.m. And this meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the PTO website. So if you missed anything, you can go back to the website and watch the video. Once again, thank you everyone for coming. I'm really looking forward to this. First, the San Mateo High School PTO would like to invite you to join the executive board. Positions for next school year, 2021 to 2022 is opening now. And the PTO is a critical piece of our school community. We're like the communications and hospitality organization. We support our parents, teachers, and our students through programs and various fun events. And we're looking currently for officers for the executive board. If you're interested in the position or know any great candidate or just want more information, please contact us. You can find our email address on the website. And I think Anne will probably put it in the chat for us in a minute. And I'll make sure our parliamentarian receives those emails so that we can get back to you and talk to you about the various roles that are available right now. The second announcement is tomorrow, there will be the return to school survey coming out from the district. So look for that in your emails. To go along with that, the district is going to have a town hall meeting on Tuesday, March 2nd at 6:30 to answer any questions about the survey. So the return to school survey is coming out tomorrow. The survey will be due March 4th. But if you have questions, hold on, because on March 2nd, 2 days before it's due, they will have a town hall so you can ask any questions and get some answers. Watch your emails. And if you're anything like me, you have to check your promotions tab because oftentimes those emails end up in my promotions tab, especially the district emails. I don't know why. I've tried to move them over, but they don't always end up there. So keep your eye out for that because that should be coming out tomorrow. So now to our presenters, our speakers. We have a really great lineup tonight, and we've had many pre-submitted questions for our speakers. We'll be discussing the vaccines available and the rollout of the vaccine for COVID. We won't be answering questions about when we can expect students to be getting back to school. That would be a district decision. So this isn't about how soon can we get the vaccines and get everybody back to school. This is more really about where can we get vaccines for our community and what vaccines should we take, or what are the differences between all the vaccines. So let me start with some introductions. First, I'd like to welcome San Mateo County Manager Mike Callaghy. Mike.
Thank you, Sandy. Really appreciate it. And thanks to you and for inviting me here today. It's an honor to be on here with the doctor and all of you today. Let me just tell you a little bit about myself. As Sandy indicated, I'm the county manager. And a lot of people say, well, what does the county manager do? What does that mean? Well, it's an organization of about 7,500 employees that I have. We have a budget of about $3.5 billion, your taxpayer dollars. And those dollars go for criminal justice and public works and a lot of things that you'll see in cities. But our biggest budgetary item really is health. And that's what we do. When you see County General Hospital, that's San Mateo County and the various clinics that we have throughout the county. That's what we do. So obviously we have been intimately involved in the pandemic, which is almost really almost now a year ago. I'll never forget, it was March 3rd when I decided to open up the Emergency Operations Center and get into full swing and get health going and everyone working together as the pandemic started to loom in front of us. But you know, it's been a very, very difficult year for all of us, but there's been a lot of good things that have come out of that year. And that's really all of us working together throughout the county, whether it's a city, whether it's the politicians in the county, whether it's the nonprofits in the county working with the county. It's been really terrific. And now we're really at that point where we see the light at the end of the tunnel, and it is getting brighter. You know, today we got great news that we're moving into the red tier starting at midnight tonight, which will allow for indoor dining to reopen and gyms to reopen and more retail to reopen. But the best news is we are rolling out the vaccines. And San Mateo County, we're very lucky. We've been many first in this county. One of them was we led the state in testing for many months. I hate to say today we're number 2 because Yolo County's in front of us, but still being 2 is not bad. And we hope to lead the state in vaccinations. Right now, today, we're currently number 12 in the state. We are the largest county, though, in that top 12. So there's no larger county or county our size that's ahead of us in distributing the vaccine. So we were the first county to get out and do mass vaccinations in the state. And we had a lot of people come and see what we were doing here, and it worked really well. And we have 2 sites that we've really been working with, San Francisco Airport in the long-term parking area and at the event center, we've been doing mass vaccinations. So let me stop there, turn it over to the doctor, and then we'll come back to some more specific questions.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, and we are very grateful to have Dr. Annie Luetkemeyer. She's an infectious disease specialist, and she's also a San Mateo High School parent to address any of our questions and concerns regarding the vaccines. Thank you, Dr. Luetkemeyer. Can you unmute yourself? Oh.
Sorry, I was double muted. I'm really delighted to be here. And I mostly want to focus my time on answering questions, but just a little bit of background that I'm an adult infectious diseases doctor, so I'm not a pediatrician, but I've spent the greater part of last year taking care of COVID patients and doing COVID research. I work at the other general hospital. So Mike's down here at San Mateo, and I'm up at San Francisco General Hospital, but I'm a San Mateo County resident. I will say that while this has been certainly a year that we will all remember, I very much agree with Mike's comment that we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel, particularly not only around our dropping case rates, which I think we're all delighted to see, but around vaccines. And if you had told me or any of us practicing in this field that that one of our biggest challenges right now would be how do we get highly effective, very safe vaccines to people on a broad scale, and how do we use the airport and the convention center, come February of this year, I think we all would have said, yeah, right, we would be lucky to have that problem. So as much as this has been there are challenges with the rollout, what a wonderful problem to have. I'm happy to answer specific questions around the vaccine, but I will just say that right now at this point in time, we have 2 different vaccines that are available that are essentially very, very similar. They're both mRNA vaccines. One's made by Moderna, one's made by Pfizer. They're both 2-dose vaccines right now, and I think the preponderance of evidence suggests that we really should be getting 2 doses, even though you start to get some good protection after the first dose. Only the Pfizer vaccine is available down to age 16. So I know one of the questions as we are all here because of San Mateo Union High School District is, well, what about kids and vaccinating kids? But we only have a vaccine that's available down to 16 right now. So that's something for us to discuss and think about. And then we're all anticipating the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. We know it will be reviewed this week and likely will be approved, and that's a 1-dose vaccine. The few comments that I'll make about the vaccines and questions that I get a lot are, one, wow, can this really be safe? I mean, you just said this happened so quickly. Didn't we rush this through, and aren't we going to find out terrible things about the vaccine down the road? Well, what I'll say about vaccines, which we're very familiar with for many, many years of having a variety of different kinds of vaccines, is that the majority of complications that we see from vaccines occur either immediately afterwards or within the first 30 days from vaccination. So it is very, very unusual to see a late complication from vaccines. It's not impossible. So that's one thing to keep in mind as we all think about vaccines. And that despite this being a very accelerated process, we have an enormous, enormous amount of data. And I think by and large, these vaccines look really safe and quite effective. I was vaccinated. I would vaccinate my family members, and I'm very actively vaccinating my patients in the clinic where I care for people mostly living with HIV and other infectious diseases at San Francisco General. I conducted one of the studies of the AstraZeneca vaccine at San Francisco General, so I've had a lot of time and effort working in the development and rollout of these vaccines as well. So I'm happy to answer questions. I'll also just say that there some unknowns here. And these are issues that we're going to address as we're building the plane while we're flying it. But I sure am glad that we're able to at least be flying the plane right now. So we're not always going to have the answer to every question. This isn't a time of tons of certainty, but I do think we have a lot more answers than we did even a few months ago. And I feel very optimistic.
Thank you, Dr. Lukemeyer. Thank you, Mr. Callaghy. I have to say, just hearing both of you talk already, I feel incredibly positive and optimistic. I really appreciate your optimism and the positive message that we're receiving. And I too am very excited that I feel like there's a light at the end of the tunnel finally. So let's go right into questions then. So our first question of the evening, will San Mateo County prioritize its teachers for the vaccine? Can teachers who teach in San Mateo County but live in another county get their vaccines here? And when do you think teachers will be able to get their vaccines?
Yeah, Sandy, let me jump in on that one. We're already doing that. As of tomorrow, we're going to be vaccinating teachers at the event center. And let me just back up so people have a little bit better understanding on how this all occurred, because a lot of people think that the county is responsible for all the vaccines, and the vaccines all come to us and we distribute them. It's just the opposite. Actually, the way the state system was set up was that vaccines are distributed through multi-county providers like PAMF, like Sutter, PAMF, Kaiser, Dignity, AHMC, Seton up in Daly City. And the county is one of those entities. And we take a lot of our doses and distribute them down to like Ravenswood Health Clinic in East Palo Alto, in NIMS up in Daly City, in Gellert up in Daly City. So we distribute them all throughout the county. But so primarily the way it was set up is that most people would have been vaccinated through their own providers. 96% of the people in this county have health insurance. And the way it was set up was that those would go to Kaiser or Sutter, PAMF and get vaccinated if you were a teacher, if you were a police officer, if you were 65 and older. We've seen that system maybe have some flaws that in some areas that need to be worked out. So as of late, we've taken on the responsibility when we have more doses. We've opened it up to the population 65 and older from any multi-county provider. Could be Kaiser, could be Sutter, could be Dignity. We've partnered with Dignity and had clinics, and that's worked very, very well for us. So we have worked in concert with the school district to take on teachers. We've set aside more than the requirement that the state, and that's 10% that the state's requiring that right now of providers. But we hope that our efforts will be multiplied by the other providers, by Kaiser and Sutter, all picking up. And UCSF, by the way, has been a great partner with us, as many of our uninsured are provided for, or Medi-Cal are provided for it and vaccinated at UCSF. So we're all trying to work together in this very, very complicated system. But the teachers are up now, and they are getting vaccinated.
Yes, that was exciting news this week. So 16-year-olds are eligible for the Pfizer vaccine. When do you foresee our children 16 and over will get the vaccine in San Mateo County? If we can get 16-year-olds 16-year-old and over students vaccinated, that would be over half of our high school district population.
Well, let me jump in and I'll turn it over to the doctor. You know what we're really constrained by, and I honestly believe this, if the state magically came up with 500,000 doses, we'd get everybody in this county vaccinated within 30 days. We have that operational ability to do that. But the 16-year-olds are going to be part of that general population way down the path, probably this summer, the way the vaccinations are rolling out right now. We just are not getting the doses to really substantiate even daily clinics that we're running or mass vaccinations on a daily basis. So it's kind of, we get them a week, or we get notification a week early of how many we're going to get, and then we plan for that week and try to get them all out, and that's the way we get doses the next week. But doctor, you may have some more thoughts on that.
Yeah, the one thing that I will share, I mean, I would like everybody to be able to get a vaccine today if they could. We just aren't in a place where we can do that. I think we also have to recognize that the priorities are based on the most, medically vulnerable working their ways backwards, and that by and large, while we know that teenagers can become infected, that typically they don't become as sick. There are always exceptions to this. They can transmit to others, but we have a lot of other tools to help limit transmission in this group that include things like masking and social distancing. And we also are seeing just our community numbers go way down, meaning that there's less there. So I don't think that we have to wait as a society to see things change until everyone is vaccinated, including in our school society, having all of the kids vaccinated. I think it will certainly make us all feel better the more people are vaccinated, but I think we're already seeing some tremendous changes in our epidemiology, even without the vast majority of society being vaccinated. So I'm eager for kids to be able to get vaccinated. I think it'll be later on in the rollout, which I think is appropriate. And I think it's very appropriate to talk about what we can do and how kids can safely be around others, even without them being vaccinated.
That makes good sense. Where can you get a vaccination in San Mateo County if you are either uninsured or you are not a member of Kaiser, Sutter, Dignity Health, etc.? If you live in San Francisco County, these people can get vaccinated at Moscone Center. If you live in Santa Clara, you can get vaccinated at Levi Stadium. But to my knowledge, there is no such place in San Mateo County.
See, this is right up my alley. And let me say, I really appreciate this question, but that is what the county is charged with. That is actually our safety net population. And we have about 70,000 people in our safety net population in this county who are uninsured or on ACE in the county, or who are on Medi-Cal. And then, and we're working diligently to get them served right now 65 and above. And the great news is, we heard today that we're over approaching 60% in the 65 and above in the county, and even higher in the 75 and above. So we're making great progress there. And we are reaching out to our clients within that safety net service and getting them appointments and getting them in. We have a staff that we have a service that we just hired to do a lot of outreach in this regard. And then it was kind of a new phenomenon to us. We realized that, hey, we were in charge of that safety net population and doing the Medi-Cal patients in this county. And that's what UCSF is helping us out with. And we have about 140,000 of those through the health plan of San Mateo County in this county. But then we found this anomaly where there was this group of people, and we figured somewhere between 15 and 40,000 that we didn't even know about, that were in between. They're not part of the multi-county providers. They're, a doctor in La Honda who has maybe 1,000 patients is not part of this system. So we are also taking those on and allowing those folks 65 and above to make appointments with us and get done. Right now, we're leading the county in vaccinations. So we are above Kaiser and Sutter, but we all want to work together, and Dignity and AHMC for sure. But we all want to work together because every shot in the arm is a good shot. Every shot in the arm is closer to us opening as a society and getting back to the new normal, whatever that may be. So we believe every shot is something that's worthwhile, no matter what plan you're associated with. if I had to do it over, and I got a say in how it would go, I'd say, send all the doses to the county and let us work with our big partners, and we'll work it out together, and we'll get mass vaccinations going. It didn't work out that way. We have these little bit of silos, but we're working through that, and we're working well together. So we will get there, but send those people, if you know any, our way, and we'll take care of them who are in that safety net realm, or who don't have a multi-county provider to go to.
That's great news. Thank you. Is there somewhere an undocumented person can get the vaccine?
They're all welcome. That's part of our safety net population. We don't ask for documentation on who gets a vaccine. But, and quite frankly, and I think the doctor will also say this, that our essential workers in some of our lower paying jobs, in the restaurants and in the stores, who are living in congregate settings, that's where we're seeing the COVID spread. And that is the frustrating part, because right now we're in this tiered system, and we have to stay to that tiered system. I mean, it's a mandate by the state that we stay in these tiers. I look forward to the day when we can break out of that and go into the neighborhoods where we have, where we know people are living in congregate settings and getting sick, and vaccinate them. But right now, a lot of those people in their 30s and 40s and maybe 50s, they don't qualify because they're not in that tier of 65 and above, or the 1B, where they're a teacher or in law enforcement. Many now will pick up in the food service business, and certainly in the ag, and we're making special arrangements to get out to the ag population, and we'll be doing those folks, vaccinating them on Thursday this week at the event center.
Oh, that's good.
And worth just making the comment, and Mike, you might want to add, you may have more to say about this, but at least in San Francisco, come the 15th of March, this will really open up much more to people under the age of 65 with any number of health problems or deemed to be at higher risk. And I think our interpretation, I work in a very under-resourced neighborhood where a lot of people have suffered from COVID, and we're basically interpreting that to mean almost all of the mission and folks there will be eligible because of the high risk and how impacted that community has been. And I suspect, Mike, you'll anticipate the same. So most people will qualify after the 15th of March if they are not a strictly young, healthy person.
Yeah, you're right, doctor. And that's what we're looking forward to, the really opportunity to break out of some of these real narrow bands that we're in right now and really expand it. But again, all that is dependent upon the doses. And we hope that, maybe Johnson & Johnson coming on soon, and more supply, coming from the feds through the state down to the counties. We really hope that to expand our opportunity to reach these different populations, because that's when we start making a difference in trying to get to herd immunity. And that's, it's going to be a while, but it's really dependent on the doses that we receive.
Yeah, this is really good news. This is what I was hoping to hear, because it seems like the most underrepresented population have the least access to the vaccines, and they're the most affected by COVID. So I'm really happy to hear this news.
Yeah, and the other real good news, Sandy, is that what really got us out of purple and into orange. And I just want to say a plug for our county, and you should all be happy you live here. We have spent the least amount of time in purple in the state. And that's really a credit to everyone in adhering to the rules and working together, and really getting a lot of testing out there and being number one in the state in testing. But that's something that's absolutely important. But what got us out of purple into the red was our health equity index, one of the pillars that's needed. So we jumped 2 full tiers. We went from purple to orange. And even though we weren't there on the case rate right now, because we were there on the health equity index, and that's really the folks that are getting ill in our poorer communities, we're doing well there right now. So that allowed all of us to go to red.
That's great. I am proud of our county. So I heard there is a 1-dose vaccine. Should I wait for that vaccine if I'm worried about my reaction to the vaccine?
Yeah, so thanks, Sandy, for that question. So The current vaccines that are available, the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines, are each 2-dose vaccines. They're mRNA vaccines. And I think, as we've all heard, there can be reactions to these vaccines. And I want to break them into 2 different categories. There are the reactions that are just make you feel lousy. Your arm might hurt. Some people may feel run down or tired for the next day. Rarely they can even have flu-like symptoms. It's a little closer to something like the shingles vaccine, if you've had that before. Those are nuisance reactions, which we don't like to, no one wants to have that, but sometimes you feel like, well, at least I know my immune system is working. I felt lousy after my shots, but I kind of embraced it a little bit. Those are very tolerable, and for most people really don't cause a problem at all. Rarely someone needs to stay home for a day. To be clear, you are not infected with COVID during that time, and if you develop symptoms, you are not infectious to others. So many times people have said, oh gosh, if I feel like I have the flu, maybe it means that this is a live virus vaccine and I might be infectious to others. That is not the case. You're not fully protected till after the 2 weeks after the second vaccine. So we have very rarely seen people who've gotten vaccinated one day and they've gotten COVID several days later just by bad luck because they weren't fully protected. So if you do really feel sick and think you might have COVID, you should go get tested for COVID. But for most people, feeling sore, run down a little bit, that's just what we expect the vaccine to do. Then in a very, very small number of people, we can see serious allergic reactions. And again, this is like, on the order of, 2 per 100,000 or less. They're more common in people who already have very serious allergic reactions to food or to medications. People who carry things like EpiPens because they know they have a bad peanut or medication allergy. And we have, rarely then seen the serious allergic reaction called anaphylactic reaction. For this reason, everybody who gets the vaccine is watched for 15 minutes afterwards. And people who've had a serious reaction to other, foods or medications, or who carry an EpiPen, are asked to be watched for longer, for up to 30 minutes. If people are going to develop this very serious allergic reaction, it typically develops very, very quickly. So that's good news. It's not that you go home and 12, 14 hours later, then you become sick. It's very directly related to the vaccine, and it's very, very uncommon. If you are in that category and you're worried about it, let the vaccinators know that you have an EpiPen, you've brought it with you, and you need to be monitored. But to my knowledge, all of these reactions have been able to be managed medically, and there have not been serious complications from them. So is this a reason why you shouldn't get vaccinated? Well, I would talk to your provider and think that through, but we've seen many, many people get vaccinated who have had severe allergic reactions to other exposures and done beautifully. Even those who've had a mild or even a serious allergic reaction have done very, very well. So it's a risk benefit, but in general, the risks of COVID have far outweighed the very, very rare risk of allergic reaction. It is worth thinking through. We have seen no anaphylactic reactions to the adenovirus vaccines, which is the Johnson & Johnson one that's coming, and there are other ones coming down the pike. So it may be that is less common. I will say we always learn things when vaccines go from a clinical trial setting where we enroll tens of thousands to rolling them out worldwide, where we enroll hundreds of thousands and millions. And we always learn that there may be, very, very rare side effects. I don't think we recognize this very rare risk of anaphylaxis quite as much until we rolled out millions of doses. So again, very uncommon, watch carefully, and in people with very serious history of reactions, you may want to wait until the Johnson & Johnson vaccine comes out, although I will say for most people, this really hasn't been a problem.
And just to support that, of the 30,000 people, so almost 30,000 people we put through the mass vaccination sites here in San Mateo County, I believe we had one minor reaction and another one was more of an anxiety type of situation. So, I mean, astronomical numbers with very, very little reaction.
So that actually leads into our next question. There has been a recent report from the CDC saying that over 100 people have died from reactions to the vaccine. Is this okay? Do people die from flu vaccines?
Yeah. So I'm really glad that someone asked this question, because I think that what they're referring to is the VAERS, which is the Vaccine Adverse Event Reaction System. And so we report adverse reactions. So 113 deaths have been reported that occurred in people who had received a vaccine. Remember, when the vaccine was rolled out, we really prioritized older patients and nursing home patients. This means that people had a vaccine and then subsequently died at some period of time, and it was reported. Not a single one of those deaths, to my knowledge, were attributed to the vaccine. I think this was attributed to the fact that we were vaccinating now hundreds of thousands of older patients, and people do die. And I don't think that for all investigations that I have seen for these deaths were not attributed to the vaccine. So in general, all of the data, which we've been watching very, very closely, I have not heard of any deaths associated with the coronavirus vaccine. And we talked about, the very rare allergic reactions that are there. People can get a serious reaction to the flu vaccine. There can be other reactions to other vaccines, but in general, most of the licensed vaccines that we have are quite safe and have very well characterized side effects, so we know what to expect.
Thank you for clearing that up. That report just came out, I think, just last weekend, right? It got a lot of airtime, so I'm glad you cleared that up. Thank you. Next question. Why are we allowing additional groups to get vaccinated when we haven't finished vaccinating the initial highest risk groups? This seems to lead to a lot of frustration amongst the most needy and unrealistic expectations for those newly added.
That's very true, and a lot of frustration for us too, because it really, people really start to demand that they, get vaccinated when their group comes up. And we went from 75, we didn't have enough vaccine to do all the 75-year-olds and above, and then we went to 65. And we still didn't have, enough to do the 75-year-olds. So now we're even down to, to some of the essential work groups here, and we don't have enough vaccine to finish off the prior group. So it does create frustration in the groups, and we're trying to really juggle all the different needs and do a lot of outreach, but certainly try to. We had an opportunity to get the police officers through on. Yesterday on Monday, and we'll do the teachers tomorrow and ag on Thursday. So we are trying to accommodate a bunch of different groups, and while we're still trying to do the 65 and above. It's very important that we do that 65 and 75, because that's where, of course, where we saw the most deaths, especially in congregate settings, and they're making great progress in all the congregate settings in this county, which is good news to all of us who might have parents or grandparents in those facilities. Because that was devastating. I can tell you the month of January was devastating in this county as far as deaths, and we've turned a corner. And let's hope that we keep heading in that right direction. But it is frustration. It is frustrating, and I do understand, the state's desire to get as many people vaccinated as possible. And there's a set tier system, and we're just trying to work our way through that system. The good news is we've vaccinated over 130,000 in this county, which represents, 1/5 of this county. Another 45,000 of those have received their second dose, fully vaccinated. So that's all good news. Those are things we should be celebrating. And we're only going to get better every day. The system, much like the testing system when it started at the beginning, was somewhat sporadic and difficult to get appointments. There'll be a day when everyone who wants a dose will be able to get a dose. It's just not today.
So when the high-risk comorbidities group becomes eligible, how will the county ensure that the most needy get vaccinated as opposed to those with minor health conditions? What verification will you require to qualify for this group?
Well, let me take a stab at it, and let me turn it over to the doctor, because, we talk a lot about this in every group that comes up, next. How do we verify? Well, number one, everyone has to attest to the fact that they're within that group. We know that some people are not going to be honest, because it's like getting the golden ticket right now to get that vaccine. But we'll probably have some requirements, whether it's a doctor's note. We will depend on the physicians in this county and outside this county to legitimately give those who fall into that category some kind of note, possibly, that they'll be able to show when checking in. For police, we made them show, police ID. And teachers, I'm sure, will do something along those same lines. So, and inevitably, you get people to try to jump in line and say, oh, I didn't know. I just, trying to see if they could squeeze through. And I get that. Everybody wants this. I want to get it. I can't wait for my turn to get it, but it's just not today. We will get there in the future, but it's just difficult right now, but we will put some criteria in place, and maybe the doctor has some thoughts about this.
I can speak to the guidance that's in San Francisco, and I just had to pull it up again, where they, have told us ultimately it's up to the vaccinating entity to decide on the appropriate processes for verifying eligibility. But what I will say, because these are still coming together, if you are, if you're concerned that your vaccination is based on your job and you're going in to, make an appointment or going to get the vaccine based on the type of job you have, bring proof of what kind of job you have. There's very clear guidance on the web that talks about what essential workers are. Bring a pay slip, bring something like that. If you are in a tier where, it's opened up to people who have other comorbid conditions and you have a lung condition that qualifies you, a kidney condition, something like that, bring some documentation of that. People who are caregivers in some vaccinating sites are allowed to be vaccinated, including like in-home support services. So it can't hurt to bring that with you. And I suspect that as we move forward, it's going to not be implemented in the same way in every single place, but it can't hurt to be prepared and bring that. On the same way, don't let this deter you. Don't feel like you have to have a dossier proving that you have the right to get a vaccine. Because if you are going along with the rules, you're able to get an appointment or go in and you believe that you're in that tier, and Mike can speak to this, but I suspect that you will be able to be vaccinated. I have not heard of people being turned away, thus far, if they were able to get that far because they didn't have proof that they were over 65 years of age or something along those lines.
The doctor's absolutely right. I mean, we've been, very generous, and most people, I mean, really, we're finding that really a lot of people are adhering to the tiers, and they understand that. But really, it's a situation where we want to get as many people vaccinated as possible, and at the end of the day, we're even calling if there's, and I want to assure everybody, there is no waste at the end of the day on these mass vaccinations. We got people on a list that we're calling who fitted that criteria and just weren't able to get an appointment. But I think the overarching message that the doctor and I want to get out is that everybody should get vaccinated when their time comes. We really want to encourage people to get this vaccination, which we believe is very safe. And like I said, I can't wait to get it myself.
Thank you. Okay, it is my understanding that mRNA long-term side effects are just being studied now. What type of long-term effects could possibly occur in our children after vaccination? Any new updates in this research?
Yeah, so this question brings up a really good point, which is that these are the two first licensed mRNA vaccines that we have. So we are in new territory. It helps to take a step back and recognize what mRNA vaccines do. So mRNA is in all of our bodies. It's sort of the transcript that our cells use to make proteins. So we all use mRNA right now as we're sitting here. One of the reasons why the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines are a little tricky and need to be refrigerated or even kept very frozen is because mRNA is very unstable, and it gets degraded and broken down very quickly. So what the mRNA does is it gets into the cell, tells the cell to get translated into the protein that's the spike protein of the coronavirus, which is what the immune system recognizes. And then that mRNA gets broken down and it is gone. And so then the immune system's response to this translated protein is what really helps generate the protection here. It doesn't get into the nucleus, kind of the powerhouse of the cell. So there's not an ability for this to stick around and become a long-standing part of the cells. And so I think that because of this and because of the data that we have so far, we think it's very unlikely that there's going to be long-term consequences. But it is early days. The other piece is that, again, as I said before, that for the vast majority of vaccines, side effects that we see occur within the first, 30 days to 3 months. It's extraordinarily uncommon for vaccines of any type to have long-term sequelae years down the road. That's just not what we see by the nature of how vaccines work in general. So we need to learn more, but we do have an enormous amount of patients who've been part of clinical trials, and we're following them very, very closely. And thus far, they've seemed quite safe. In terms of children, long-term side effects, again, as I mentioned, it's only down to the age 16. Clinical trials are ongoing for adolescents, and then we hope potentially kids who are younger. And we will learn more about that. But I think that, again, the expectation is that because this mRNA is degraded pretty quickly, that the consequences for long-term side effects are very minimal. I'll also say we're really learning a lot about the consequences of the long-term side effects of COVID infection. COVID, when people are infected, very commonly not only can cause severe disease, as we know, but can cause these long-term consequences that can be very challenging, that we don't really understand what causes them or why they're there. And so that's something to think about as we balance the risk-benefit, because that's something that distinguishes COVID from other viral diseases, where even after you have recovered, some people will have fatigue, loss of sense of smell, other complications that they can have for many months afterwards, and that is quite challenging.
Yes, it is. Okay, I think this is for you, Mike Callaghy. Do you have a guesstimate for when those aged 50 to 64 with no underlying conditions could be vaccinated?
Well, I wish it was right now because I fall in that category, but
Me too.
unfortunately, that's not the case. So, we've got about 40,000 people in the current category to get through, the essential workers, on top of finishing off the 65 and 75 population and above. And we're making, like I mentioned before, we're making really good progress there. This new group of essential workers between teachers and those who work in food and ag and the police officers are probably going to be about 40,000. After that, in March 15th, I believe it is, we go to those under 65 with underlying health conditions that the doctor was just talking about. There's probably, a great deal in there too, maybe another 20,000 or so. So we hear, and we don't know for sure because we have not been definitively told, that after that it would switch to an age-based group. So presumably it could be, okay, now 55 to 65, which would be very easy, right? You just show up to a site, and assuming that there's maybe a one-door entry for everyone, that you can go anywhere and get vaccinated. And I'm not sure we'll ever get there, but we do take on those folks to the extent that we can do that, and just make it based on age and make a simple registration process. That's what we're looking for, and then it would just go down from there. Maybe 45 to 55 and 35 and so on. So we're looking for that. We just don't know when it will occur yet. And it'll all be based on the amount of doses that are distributed through the state.
Okay, so I think that answers this question. After people 65 and up and those under 65 with health issues have been vaccinated, what will be the next group? That would probably be the 50 to 64-year-olds then.
We hope so, yeah. I mean, they may
Okay.
go 60 to 65, but I really think they'll probably do it in 10-year increments.
Okay, that's good to hear. Thank you. Are either of the COVID-19 vaccines self-amplifying, meaning that they encode not only on the protein needed for an immune response, but they also invoke the cells to create more of the mRNA? Could this elicit autoimmune complications? Please explain. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to give a short answer to that, which is that they just have the mRNA. They cannot make more of the mRNA. Autoimmune diseases are very complicated, and it's not always clear what the triggers are, but to the data that we have, these are not self-amplifying. And the world of autoimmune diseases is very complicated, but there have not been, convincing associations of these vaccines with autoimmune disease.
Okay. Okay. I've noticed that the categories of people, various medical groups or county vaccination centers are in the process of vaccinating can vary. So basically that, yeah, it can vary who they're vaccinating. Okay, for instance, Stanford was vaccinating 65 plus many days before other vaccination centers. Why is this? If one has enrolled in the San Mateo County's notification system, which vaccination center should you contact for the shot?
Yeah, well, it will really depend on what tier you fall in. And if you certainly live in San Mateo County, then I would sign up for our own notification system at County Health and My Turn, because it appears that the entire state will go to My Turn through California Health soon. They've launched it down in Southern California, and we believe that probably by March it'll be throughout the entire state, and that's the notification system of when your turn will come up and allow you to register. So right now, the county doing the mass sites when we started out was really just for the county clients, that safety net population I told you about, because those are the ones we got the doses for, as opposed to the multi-county providers, Kaiser and those who got their own doses for their own clients. But as we had some difficulty reaching out to our population, which is much more difficult to reach out to when you think about some of the folks that are homeless or who move often and don't leave forwarding addresses, but are still part of the San Mateo County health plan or the health system. We had doses that we wanted to open up and get out to anyone. So we did open it up to anyone 65 and above, regardless of the plan. To the extent that we can do that in the future, we'll certainly do that. The good news is we got 18,000 doses in today, I believe. That was because the last week were held up because of the storms. So we got last week's and this week. So we basically have 2 weeks of doses here. And some of those will be designated second doses. And remember, what's going to be interesting here is when we get to the point where we vaccinated so many people that we're doing, first doses and second doses on the same day, hopefully in 2 different locations. But it's difficult because the Pfizer, it has to be, really, a pharmacist needs to work with it in the mass vaccination site. It has to be reconstituted, and it's a little bit more difficult to handle, not impossible, but more difficult to handle in a mass vaccination site. Where Moderna is just, it's a lot easier, but you don't get a say in which doses you're getting. And right now, any dose is a good dose. Okay,
I'm just going to finish up the second part of this question. So I think they're just trying to get information about how the notification center works. Does it send out an alert blast to all people eligible, or do you have to get on a list? And do you have to keep looking every day to get on a list?
Yeah, the way it'll work is that you'll be notified that you're eligible. That's the first part of it. The second part of it is really that now you've got to find a place to, at least the way the system is set up now, and it may evolve over time, but then you've got to go to a location, whether it's your own provider and try to get on a list, or if the county opens it up to all providers, then you can certainly get on to our list. But if you sign up with us, at the end of the day, and we had some 14,000 people sign up with us, regardless of what health plan you're in. At the end of the day, when we have those events where we open it up, that's the list we're calling and saying, hey, we've got openings, sign up, right now, or we'll schedule you for an appointment right now. So it's good to be on both of those, but expect the fact that, as things evolve, you will get notified, and you will have to then try to find a provider that'll take you.
Okay. San Mateo County has started vaccinating teachers, but I read that it might be a slow process to vaccinate all of our teachers. Is there any way to speed that up, given the pressure to reopen schools this spring?
Well, I'd love to. If we had more doses, like I said, we could get it done pretty quickly. It really will depend on the doses and then balancing, teachers and those 65 and above and 75 above in every one of those categories. And it's it's not only going to be the county doing this, it'll be Kaiser and Sutter, who are also taking on, and quite frankly, the vast majority of teachers in this county are insured through Kaiser and Sutter. So it'll all be all of us working together. So hopefully that'll speed things up. I realize it can't come too soon. I got to say, Nancy McGee, superintendent of education for the county, has done a marvelous job working with the superintendents throughout the county to really set up a process that's equitable in getting those, vaccinated first who are really working in the schools right now, or about to reopen schools where equity is a major factor. So we're really we're working in concert with Nancy and her staff, and she's done a great job working with the superintendents to really set this up.
So what is the county doing to reach out to our non-English speaking communities who might not have access to technology to check websites consistently to see when vaccines might be available to them?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that is a huge, huge hurdle to get over. And we have tried to put it in so many different languages, but really we have found probably the most beneficial way for us to do it is we've contracted with our CBOs, our community-based organizations that are trusted in those neighborhoods, so they can go out and help us spread the message. They're the trusted individuals who people go to for services, or maybe for church or whatever it may be, for services. And we've really distributed a lot of information to those folks in the various languages to help us get out. We've also started a vaccination equity committee, really a large group in this county that really covers every corner, every segment of this county, so that we don't miss anyone. We want to, and we're talking about how do we best reach any particular group. And it's not all the same. Not everyone is going to be reached the same way. Some people, want to get the vaccination right away and are happy to do it. Others are going to take, have a mistrust of government, and it's going to take a lot more messaging and work with the community-based organizations to get them vaccinated. So this is where we put a lot of effort. Equity is so important to us. We cannot leave the poor people behind in this vaccination process. And it's something that we are constantly working on every single day.
Thank you. If you get regularly tested at work, will you test positive soon after receiving the vaccine?
No, you will not. This is a great question. So the tests for COVID, whether it's a swab up your nose or where you give saliva, are all looking for the virus itself. And none of the vaccines will lead you to test positive in your saliva or in your nose. The only test that it may change to positive is an antibody test, and it depends on the type of antibody test, and I won't get too technical there, but if you're being tested with your blood, which is not to look for infectious COVID, but to look for exposure to COVID, you may now have a positive antibody depending on the type of test, but that does not test you for infectious COVID. So, you can if you get tested every week with a nasal swab, that should not become positive. If you do have a positive test, then you should assume that it's the real deal.
Okay. And after the 2 doses of vaccines, you can still have the virus in you, and therefore you can still spread the virus. Is this correct?
Yeah. So this gets a little bit tricky when we talk about 95% effective. What do we mean? So first of all, for the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines, they are nearly 100% effective in preventing very serious disease and death. So that is important. That's what we're trying to do here. Then when they say 95% effective, they mean in preventing symptomatic COVID infection. And that's also very important. That's people who have symptoms and test positive. But these studies weren't exactly designed to look for people who have asymptomatic infection, which we know can occur in some percentage of the population. So we're still learning how well the vaccines protect people against asymptomatic infection, which can still be transmissible to other people. So the short version is that we don't know, but we have very heartening data that are coming out every day that suggest that when people are vaccinated, even if they get infected, the viral load is much lower, and viral load is what drives infection to others. And we also know that in places like Israel and in the UK, when they have vaccinated large numbers of people, we are seeing the case rates plummet. So the concern would be that, well, gosh, if these vaccines only protect against symptomatic disease, but do nothing against asymptomatic disease, and you could be then infected and forward transmit, then we wouldn't see that happening in these populations. So I think that the preponderance of what we know at this point suggests that not only will people be protected against symptomatic infection, but they are going to be much less likely to be infected and then forward transmit to other people. Is that going to go down to zero right away? Probably not, but it will be much lower. What it doesn't mean is that in this moment in time, if Mike gets his long waited for vaccine, that he can just throw his mask in the garbage and not do any social distancing or anything else yet. We're still not at that place yet for that reason, because we're concerned about the possibility of asymptomatic infection, but we're a whole lot closer to that possibility. And I think we're learning more and more every day. But I think seeing how these vaccines are rolling out in the real world has been incredibly heartening to all of us, because the numbers don't lie. People are getting vaccinated and the case rates are going down, and it's really remarkable to see.
Yeah, that is really great news. Thank you for explaining that. Okay, Mike, when you say send them our way, if they don't have insurance or a multi-county provider, what do you mean? Is there a phone number or a website they can use to get an appointment for a vaccine?
Yeah,
And,
go on our website and fill out our form, the county form, and you'll be part of that list that we call. Absolutely. I mean, we are, for those folks who have a doctor or physician in this county and they're not connected to one of the multi-county providers, we will help you get vaccinated, and we'll do it through our system. We've been doing that from really since the inception of this, because we found that gap there. Even though they have insurance, it's something that we've taken on as a county.
so there's a county form that everybody can fill out. Like I could even fill it out today, and you'll contact me when it's my turn to have my vaccine.
Exactly.
Oh, that's great.
And Mike, could you put the link in the chat box? I bet people would love to have that.
Doctor, you're much more sophisticated than I am at working the chat box thing. So I will try to find
Even if you just email me, I can put it up on our website underneath where I put all of our presentations like this. I'll put it right with the video. I'll put the link to sign up with the county.
Sounds good. I'll get that to you. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great to know. If we just put ourselves on that maybe we'll have a better idea and we'll be ready to know when we can get our shots.
Right. And for right now, so we're doing those folks who don't have a multi-county provider that are 65 and above, or that fall into one of these essential, we haven't really started with essential service groups, but we will get to those if they don't have that provider like Kaiser or Sutter or Dignity or AHMC.
Yeah. Yeah, I think everybody just wants to get it as soon as possible, right? They don't want to miss a day. Okay, I think we're on our last question, actually. And the last question is, will the COVID vaccine become a yearly vaccine like the flu vaccine?
So this is a great question that I don't know the answer to. And I think that there would be two reasons that potentially it will become a yearly vaccine. One is if the immunity that we get from the vaccine wanes over time, so that we need to be boosted. And we don't know how long vaccination lasts for right now. Right now, it looks like it's at least probably 6+ months, where we haven't had the vaccines around all that long. But we do look like there is at least short-term, relatively durable protection. The other reason why we might need to do this yearly, and this is the reason that we do it yearly in the with the flu vaccine, is if COVID continues to change and mutate. That's what viruses do. And the reason that we get the flu shot every year is because the circulating flu strains are different enough, and we have been unable to come up with a universal flu vaccine that protects us against all the different strains. So we pick the top 3 or 4 strains that we think will be circulating, and we vaccinate against those. So it is possible, I think many people may have heard of what we're calling variants, so different types of COVID virus that are mutating and circulating in the world and are slightly different from each other. if this coronavirus becomes different enough that we need to change the vaccine, we might need a booster or a yearly shot that represents the most current version or the most changed version of the virus. I think the really good news is that we would not be starting from scratch. So I know that many of the manufacturers right now are already planning a booster for what we call the South African variant, which we've heard a lot about in the news, so that in parts of the world really affected by that, people could get a booster there. What I don't think we're going to need, though, right now is a vaccine for every single variant that's out there. So generally what we've seen and the data are emerging is that these vaccines are quite good and should provide pretty robust protection against most types of the circulating vaccine that are out there. So that's great news. We don't have to worry that we have to get a vaccine for every single variant that is there and that we've just lost all of that hard work. There's probably some degree of cross protection. But what we will be doing once we've vaccinated everybody the next go round, whether or not we'll have a booster, I don't know, but we'll be in a much better place than we are now should we need a booster, because it will probably be much easier to modify the vaccine. And that's indeed underway right now for some of the manufacturers, particularly to target parts of the world with some of these more different variants widely circulating.
That's good to hear. I'm glad they're on top of that.
So Sandy, if for your listeners, if you can go to smchealth.org and get the latest on the vaccine, you read more, and then right at the top it says receive notification when you are eligible. So that's where you would register. There's
a button there that you would click on. And then I've also had a couple people, Dr. Luke Meyer and my friend Esther, chat with me and say it. Okay, so it's actually, if you do forms, the word forms.office.com, that will actually bring you to the form.
Great, even better.
So, yeah, so there's two ways to access. And then, like I said, I'll also post that on the PTO website, right where I'll post the video for today's event.
Great.
So, excellent. Thank you so much for joining us and clearing up all of those misconceptions and answering those questions tonight. I'd like to thank RC Molina and Jenny Maupin, our PTO Vice Presidents of Programs, who realized the need for this presentation and organized this presentation for us today. And also our first VP, Anne, for contacting Mr. Callaghy and getting him to come on tonight also. Thank you so much for everybody for joining us. I think this was such a great informational evening and timely, very timely. Yeah, and you've answered some really great questions that I think everybody's been wondering. So I'm looking forward to the day that we're all vaccinated.
It's coming.
Thank you so much for having us.